Imagine picking up your Samsung phone one random day and realizing something feels calmer. Not louder, not flashy, not screaming for attention, just smoother, faster, more comfortable, like your phone finally understands how you actually use it. That's the direction One UI 8.5 is quietly moving toward, and even though it hasn't officially launched yet, the leaks, early builds, and internal changes tell a very interesting story. Hey everyone, welcome back to Tech Gadget. If you love Samsung phones, One UI updates, and real-world tech that actually matters, you're in the right place. Today we're talking about One UI 8.5, not hype, not fake promises, and definitely not a launch video because remember One UI 8.5 is not officially released yet. This is about what Samsung seems to be building behind the scenes and why this update could be one of the most important, quiet upgrades Samsung has done in years. One UI 8.5 doesn't feel like a reset. Samsung already knows One UI is powerful. It knows customization is its strength. So instead of changing everything, One UI 8.5 focuses on removing friction. Those tiny moments where your phone feels just a little slow, a little cluttered, or a little confusing. This update is clearly designed to fix those. Let's start with how the system feels. One of the biggest internal goals of One UI 8.5 appears to be consistency. Animations, transitions, and gestures are being tuned to behave the same way everywhere. When you open apps, switch tasks, pull down notifications, or jump between split-screen apps, everything follows the same rhythm. Nothing feels rushed, and nothing feels delayed. It's subtle, but once you notice it, it's hard to unsee. Samsung seems to be focusing heavily on reducing micro-lag. Not the kind of lag that reviewers measure with stopwatches, but the kind your brain notices. Those half-second pauses that break flow. One UI 8.5 aims to remove those moments entirely. And that philosophy extends into multitasking. Samsung phones are known for multitasking, but One UI 8.5 looks like it's making multitasking feel less technical and more natural. Instead of forcing you to think about modes and layouts, the system adapts to how you move between apps. App switching feels predictive. Split screen feels easier to control. Floating windows feel lighter and more responsive. It's not about adding more features. It's about making existing ones feel effortless. Now let's talk about customization, because this is where Samsung always shines. One UI 8.5 doesn't overwhelm you with new menace. Instead, it gives you smarter defaults. The UI adapts better to your wallpaper, your usage habits, and even the time of day. Home screen elements scale more intelligently. Widgets feel more alive instead of static blocks. You don't need to spend hours tweaking settings to make your phone feel personal. One UI 8.5 seems to handle a lot of that automatically, while still letting power users go deep if they want. And this balance is important. Because not everyone wants to customize everything, but everyone wants their phone to feel right. Another big focus area appears to be battery behavior. Not battery size, not charging speed headlines, but battery intelligence. One UI 8.5 looks like it's learning usage patterns more accurately. Instead of aggressive background killing or overly conservative power saving, the system adapts in real time. Apps you rely on stay ready. Apps you don't use quietly fade into the background. Battery drain feels more predictable, and that predictability matters more than raw numbers. Performance tuning also plays a role here. Instead of pushing the processor all the time, One UI 8.5 seems designed to deliver short bursts of power exactly when needed. Opening heavy apps, rendering animations, processing photos, and then immediately dialing things back down. This keeps the phone cooler, smoother, and more comfortable to use over long periods. Now let's talk about privacy and control. Because this is where Samsung is clearly doubling down. One UI 8.5 doesn't shout about security features, but they're deeply integrated. App permissions feel more transparent. Background activity is easier to understand. Sensitive actions feel more protected without becoming annoying. Instead of constant permission pop-ups, the system quietly guides you towards safer choices. It feels less like your phone is warning you, and more like it's watching your back. And this approach extends to system notifications as well. Notifications in One UI 8.5 feel cleaner, less cluttered, more intentional. Important alerts stand out better while noise gets pushed aside. The goal isn't fewer notifications, it's better ones. You spend less time managing alerts and more time actually using your phone. Even small details reflect this mindset. Menus feel less crowded, spacing feels more comfortable. Fonts and icons feel balanced rather than busy. Everything feels like it belongs exactly where it is. This is the kind of polish you don't notice in screenshots, but you feel it every time you unlock your phone. And that's why One UI 8.5 is shaping up to be special. Not because it's dramatic, not because it's flashy, but because it's thoughtful. Samsung seems to understand that smartphones have matured. People don't want constant change anymore. They want reliability, smoothness, and confidence. One UI 8.5 feels like Samsung saying, "We know what works. Now let's perfect it." And remember, this update isn't officially out yet. Things can change, features can evolve. But based on what we're seeing so far, One UI 8.5 is less about impressing reviewers and more about respecting users. And honestly, that's exactly the kind of update we need right now. One thing that becomes very clear when you start understanding the direction of One UI 8.5 is that Samsung is no longer designing software just to look good in promo videos. This update feels like it's designed for people who actually live on their phones. People who unlock their device dozens of times a day, jump between apps without thinking, and expect their phone to keep up silently without asking for attention. With One UI 8.5, Samsung seems to be asking a simple question: how can we make the phone disappear and let the user take control? That mindset changes everything. Take daily usage for example. Most of us don't think about features. We think in habits. Open phone, reply to messages, switch apps, scroll, lock phone, repeat. One UI 8.5 focuses heavily on smoothing this entire loop so it feels continuous instead of broken into steps. The system reacts faster to your intent. When you swipe, it already knows where you're headed. When you tap, there's no hesitation. The interface doesn't wait for you to finish thinking. It moves with you. And this isn't about speed benchmarks. It's about confidence. The confidence that your phone will respond exactly how you expect it to, every single time. Samsung appears to have put a lot of work into background intelligence. Apps don't just open faster. They stay ready in a smarter way. The system remembers what you were doing, not just what app you used. Switching back to something feels instant because the phone understands context, not just commands. Even scrolling feels more natural. Motion is smoother but also more controlled. There's less bounce, less unnecessary movement, and more focus on clarity. It's easier on the eyes, especially during long sessions. And speaking of eyes, display behavior seems more adaptive too. One UI 8.5 subtly adjusts contrast, brightness transitions, and color balance depending on lighting conditions and usage time. These changes aren't dramatic, but they reduce fatigue. Late night use feels softer. Daytime visibility feels clearer. The screen works with you instead of forcing one setting for every situation. Now let's talk about how One UI 8.5 handles attention. Your phone is constantly competing for it. Notifications, pop-ups, alerts, banners, all trying to pull you in. Samsung seems to be rethinking this entirely. Instead of bombarding you, the system prioritizes calm. Notifications feel more intentional, less spammy, more focused on relevance. The system learns which alerts you interact with, and which ones you ignore. And it adapts. Over time, the phone becomes quieter without you having to manually silence everything. Important notifications feel more visible, but not louder. Subtle changes in spacing, animation, and placement guide your eyes naturally. This also affects how apps behave when you're multitasking. One UI 8.5 makes multitasking feel less like a feature and more like a natural extension of usage. Floating windows don't feel heavy. Split screen doesn't feel forced. You can move things around easily, resize without frustration, and jump back into full screen instantly. The system no longer feels like it's showing off. It feels like it's helping. Customization also takes a more mature turn here. Instead of endless toggles, One UI 8.5 leans into smart personalization. Your phone adapts over time. Home screen layouts subtly shift, widgets update based on context. Colors feel more balanced with your wallpaper without you needing to manually tweak themes. It's personalization without effort. You still get full control if you want it. Samsung hasn't taken that away. But now the default experience feels good out of the box. That's a big deal for users who just want their phone to feel right without spending hours setting it up. And then there's battery behavior. Quietly one of the most important parts of this update. One UI 8.5 doesn't try to impress with massive battery claims. Instead it focuses on consistency. Battery drain feels more predictable. Overnight loss is reduced. Background activity is handled more intelligently. Charging behavior also feels more thoughtful. The phone understands when you usually unplug it. It manages power delivery in a way that prioritizes battery health instead of short-term speed. This isn't something you notice in one day. It's something you appreciate after weeks of use. Performance tuning follows the same philosophy. Heavy apps get power when they need it. Light tasks stay efficient. Heat management feels improved because the system avoids unnecessary spikes. The phone stays comfortable even during long sessions, which directly improves user experience. Security and privacy are also more deeply woven into the system. Instead of constantly warning you, One UI 8.5 protects quietly. Sensitive actions feel more secure. App permissions are clearer. Background access is better managed. The phone feels more trustworthy. And that's important in a time when our devices hold everything from personal photos to financial information. Another underrated aspect is how One UI 8.5 handles learning. The system doesn't just learn routines, it adapts when routines change. If your schedule shifts, the phone adjusts. If you stop using an app, it fades into the background. If you suddenly start relying on something new, it becomes more responsive. This makes the phone feel alive, but not intrusive. And that's the key difference. One UI 8.5 doesn't try to be smart in your face. It tries to be smart behind the scenes. You don't constantly see AI labels or fancy effects. You just feel like your phone is finally working with you instead of needing instructions. This is the kind of update that grows on you. At first, you might think nothing major has changed. But after a few days, going back to an older version feels uncomfortable. Everything suddenly feels slower, noisier, and less refined. That's when you realize how much One UI 8.5 is doing quietly. And again, it's important to remember, this update isn't officially released yet. Things can change, features can be refined. But the direction is clear. Samsung is prioritizing experience over spectacle. For everyday users, this matters more than any flashy feature list. At this point, when you spend enough time with the idea behind One UI 8.5, you start realizing something important. This update isn't chasing trends. It's not trying to win arguments on social media or look impressive in feature lists. It feels like Samsung sat down and asked, what actually annoys people after 6 months of using their phone? And then quietly started fixing those things. Because the real problems with smartphones don't show up on day one. They show up when the excitement fades. When the phone becomes routine. That's where One UI 8.5 really shines. One of the biggest shifts here is how the system treats long-term usage. Phones usually slow down not because the hardware gets weaker, but because software becomes messy. Apps pile up, background processes fight for attention. Animations start feeling heavy. One UI 8.5 feels like it's built to age better. The system keeps itself organized. Apps you barely use don't get the same priority anymore. They don't sit in memory pretending to be important. The phone learns what matters to you now, not what mattered 3 months ago. That alone keeps everything feeling lighter over time. You'll also notice fewer moments where the phone thinks before responding. Those micro pauses, the ones that make a device feel old, are reduced. Not eliminated completely, but managed better. The system anticipates actions more confidently, which makes everyday use feel smoother. Another subtle but powerful change is how One UI 8.5 handles transitions between tasks. You don't feel like you're jumping between separate worlds anymore. Moving from a message to a browser, from a video to settings, from one app to another. It all feels connected, like one continuous space instead of a collection of boxes. This matters more than people realize, especially for users who multitask a lot. Students, creators, professionals, casual users. Everyone benefits when the phone doesn't interrupt your flow. Even simple things like rotating the screen or switching orientation feel better tuned. The phone reacts when it should, not after you've already adjusted your grip. These tiny details don't scream for attention, but they build trust. And trust is a big theme in One UI 8.5. You trust the phone to hold your place. You trust it to save your progress. You trust it not to mess up when you're in a hurry. That's a huge deal. Samsung also seems to be rethinking how features are introduced. Instead of pushing everything at once, One UI 8.5 lets you discover things naturally. You stumble upon useful tools when you need them, not through pop-ups or tutorials that interrupt you. This makes the experience feel more personal. Like the phone is growing with you instead of constantly asking for setup and confirmation. There's also a noticeable improvement in how One UI 8.5 handles errors and mistakes. If you swipe the wrong way, tap the wrong thing, or close something accidentally, recovery feels easier. The system is more forgiving. It doesn't punish small slips, which makes using the phone less stressful. This is especially important for users who aren't tech savvy. A phone shouldn't feel like it's waiting for you to mess up. One UI 8.5 feels more supportive. Another area where this update quietly improves life is consistency. The UI feels more unified. Fonts, spacing, animations, and visual balance feel aligned across apps. Nothing feels randomly designed anymore. Even Samsung's own apps feel like they belong to the same ecosystem now. Switching between them doesn't feel jarring. That consistency reduces mental load, even if users don't consciously notice it. And let's talk about daily reliability. Notifications arrive when they should. Alarms behave more predictably. Background sync doesn't randomly break. These are things users rarely praise, but they complain loudly when they fail. One UI 8.5 focuses on preventing those failures rather than advertising new tricks. Over time, this builds confidence in the device. You stop checking if something worked, you assume it did. The update also feels more respectful of personal space. The phone doesn't constantly demand attention. It doesn't feel desperate to be used. You pick it up when you want to, not because it nags you. That creates a healthier relationship with technology, whether Samsung intended it or not. One UI 8.5 also lays the groundwork for future updates. You can tell this isn't a one-off improvement. It feels like a foundation. The system is more modular, more adaptable, more prepared for upcoming features without becoming bloated. This is important for people who plan to keep their phones for years. Instead of feeling outdated quickly, devices running One UI 8.5 should stay relevant longer. That's good for users and honestly, good for the environment too. What's interesting is how this update changes expectations. Once you get used to this level of smoothness and balance, going back feels uncomfortable. Older versions suddenly feel noisy, cluttered, and slightly chaotic. That's usually a sign of a meaningful update. And again, it's worth remembering, One UI 8.5 isn't officially launched yet. Things can change. Some features might evolve, some ideas might be refined further. But the philosophy feels clear. Samsung is focusing on experience, not hype. This isn't about being louder than competitors. It's about being better to live with. For everyday users, that's exactly what matters. This brings us to the bigger picture. One UI 8.5 isn't trying to impress you in the first 5 minutes. It's trying to earn your trust over time. And that's why it feels different. By the time you reach this point with One UI 8.5, something quietly changes in how you look at your phone. It's no longer about, what's new? Or, what feature did they add? Instead, it becomes about how often your phone just disappears into the background and lets you live your life. That's not something you can easily show in a screenshot or explain in a bullet list, but it's something you absolutely feel after days of use. One UI 8.5 feels like Samsung finally understood that maturity matters more than excitement. This update isn't screaming for attention, it's confident enough to stay calm. And that confidence shows up everywhere. The phone feels more predictable in the best possible way. You know how it's going to behave. You know where things are. You know it won't suddenly surprise you with a weird animation, a broken layout, or a random lag spike when you're doing something important. That reliability creates comfort, and comfort is what keeps people loyal. Another thing that becomes clear over time is how One UI 8.5 respects your habits instead of forcing new ones. You don't have to relearn everything. You don't have to adapt your muscle memory. The system quietly adapts to you. That's a huge win, especially for users who don't want change for the sake of change. Even power users benefit from this approach. Advanced options are still there, deeper than ever, but they're not shoved in your face. They wait patiently until you need them. That balance between simplicity and control feels much better tuned this time around. There's also something refreshing about how One UI 8.5 handles visual design. It's cleaner, yes, but not cold. It's modern, but not flashy. Nothing feels over-designed. Everything feels intentional. The UI doesn't try to impress you every second. It tries to stay out of your way. And that's honestly the biggest compliment you can give software. You'll also notice that One UI 8.5 feels less stressful to use. Notifications don't feel chaotic. Multitasking doesn't feel overwhelming. Even long usage sessions don't leave you feeling mentally tired. The phone feels calmer, and that calmness transfers to the user. This is especially important in a time where our phones already demand too much attention. Any software that reduces friction instead of adding to it deserves credit. One UI 8.5 also feels like a promise for the future. It doesn't feel like Samsung is done. It feels like they've built a solid base and are ready to grow on top of it. Future features will likely slide into this system more naturally instead of feeling bolted on. And that's good news for anyone investing in a Samsung device right now. Another thing worth mentioning is how consistent the experience feels across different types of usage. Whether you're casually scrolling, gaming, working, editing photos, or switching between apps rapidly, the phone behaves with the same confidence. There aren't separate modes of smoothness, it's just steady. That consistency builds trust. Over time, you stop thinking about optimization, clearing memory, or managing performance. You stop worrying about whether an app will reload or whether a task will get interrupted. You simply use the phone. And that's when you know an update did its job. One UI 8.5 also sends a message about where Samsung is heading. They're no longer chasing every trend. They're refining their identity. This UI feels distinctly Samsung. Not copied, not rushed, not experimental for the sake of it. It feels like a platform that knows what it is. And for users, that stability matters more than ever. So if you're the kind of person who values smoothness over gimmicks, consistency over chaos, and comfort over constant change, One UI 8.5 will probably feel like a breath of fresh air. It won't try to impress you in the first 5 minutes. But after a week, after a month, you'll start noticing how hard it is to imagine going back. That's the mark of a strong update. Of course, One UI 8.5 isn't officially out yet, and things can still evolve. But based on what we're seeing and feeling so far, this update isn't about rewriting the rules. It's about perfecting the experience. And sometimes that's exactly what users need. If you made it this far, you're clearly someone who cares about the details. And that's what we focus on here at Tech Gadget. Not hype, not noise, just real experience explained honestly. If you enjoyed this deep dive into One UI 8.5, make sure to stick around. There's a lot more coming: real-world testing, comparisons, hidden features, and long-term impressions once this update officially rolls out. Until then, keep exploring your tech, keep questioning updates, and keep choosing what actually works for you. I'll see you in the next one.